Salamun alaikum. So today I want to start a series in addition to my regular content, which is based on the book An-Nidhaam Al-Qur'ani, or the Quranic system by Alim Shpait Neely, where he outlines a method, a methodical approach to studying the Quran that I find very interesting, and I think you will too. So we'll kind of go through his points in this series, and I'll kind of just summarize them in my own words. So to start off with, he mentions three main fundamental, we can call them axioms, that we need to hold on to in our approach to the Quran. Number one, عدم الاختلاف في القرآن. So the recognition that there is no ikhtilaf in the Quran, there is no variation and contradictions in the Quran. And this tells us that the Quran is a complete system. That's why this is the first principle, I believe, because this lets us know that the Quran, we can't approach it just looking at one verse here or one word here. We have to look at the Quran as a complete system. And so when you look at when Allah mentions tadabbur, contemplating the Quran, look at how he mentions it. He lets us know that the Quran is a complete system. He says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنِ. Do they not contemplate the Quran? وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ. And if it were from other than Allah, لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. They would have found therein much ikhtilaf, much variation and contradiction. So the reason that that verse tells us that tadabbur, contemplating the Quran, is to look at the Quran as a whole system and not just isolated verses, is because what is the result of tadabbur in this verse? The result is the recognition that there is no ikhtilaf, that there's no contradiction. How do you recognize that there's no contradiction if you don't study the whole? So tadabbur is to study the whole. It's to contemplate the whole. It's to contemplate the Quran as one unit, as a system. So that's the first principle. The second principle is قصور المتلقي. This is what the terminology he uses. We don't have to stick blindly to any terminology. This is just an easy way to think about it, but you can put it in your own words. But the idea of قصور المتلقي is the recognition of the limitations of the one receiving the knowledge of the Quran, the one studying the Quran. Any of us contemplating studying the Quran is the recognition of our own limitations. And the reason that's an important principle to begin with is because, as Allah tells us, مَا نَفِدَتْ كَلِمَاتُ اللَّهِ. The kalimat, the words of Allah, can never be exhausted. So an important principle in our approach to the Quran is the recognition that none of us knows all of the meanings of the Quran. So we can always discover more. We could always be learning more. No one has ever finalized the interpretation of the Quran. The third principle that he mentions is التغاير عن كلام المخلوقين. That we recognize that the Quran differs from the speech of created beings, of just everyday people like you and me or anyone else. So it's to recognize that when we approach the speech of the Quran, we have to approach it differently than we approach kalamul bashar, the speech of human beings. So when I say something, for example, I might use some words that I didn't really mean to use it like that, or I didn't really know what else to say, so I just threw that word in there, or it seemed like the best word. So that's the kalamul bashar. That's the speech of human beings. We do stuff like that. But when we talk about kalamullah, the speech of Allah, we have to approach it differently than we approach kalamul bashar, in the sense that we understand that everything has what An-Nidhaam calls in other places al-qasdiyya. Everything is intentional. So every word is intentional, every particle is intentional, every plural is intentional. So sometimes when Allah uses the plural, for example, kuffar, right? And then other times he says kafirun, we don't say, oh, it basically means the same thing. It's just saying disbelievers in general. No, there's qasdiyya in the wording of the Quran. There's intentionality in the wording of the Quran. So when Allah uses the word kuffar in one place and al-kafirun in another place, those are for intentional reasons. Even though they do have something in common because they come from the root kafara, right? Meaning to cover, so they have something in common. But there's qasdiyya, there's intentionality in why Allah used one in one place and one in the other place. So those are the first three principles that we want to start with in outlining the concepts in his book An-Nidhaam Al-Qur'ani in this series, which is عدم الاختلاف في القرآن, قصور المتلقي, and التغاير عن كلام المخلوقين. It's the recognition that there's no contradiction in the Quran, the limitations of the one receiving or studying the knowledge of the Quran, and the fact that it is different than the speech of al-bashar or al-makhluqeen, of human beings. Salamun alaikum.